The America that we think of today as modern. That country was born in the late 19th century. The decades after the Civil War were an exciting time of dramatic transformations for the country. Massive numbers of new immigrants would flood into the United States, some escaping persecution at home, and others simply looking for a better life for themselves and their families. They settled often in the nation's cities, which struggled to accommodate them. The immigrants would also work in factories and in sweatshops, in shops and in offices, helping to build the nation's industries. Corporations would grow larger and larger still during the late 19th century, becoming not only wealthy, but also powerful. No city grew as dramatically as Chicago in this period. In 1850, only 30,000 people called Chicago home. By the turn of the century, that number would grow to 1.7 million. Infrastructures within cities like Chicago and New York had to grow to accommodate the new residents. Overhead trains and subways helped commuters get to work through the crowded city streets. Chicago's fortunes turned on the railroads and the meatpacking industries. The great Union stockyards, shown here around 1890, were central to the city's growth. Thanks to refrigerated railroad cars, meat could be shipped to far-flung locations and eager consumers much more efficiently than live cattle. With the slaughter of the buffalo, cattle took their place on the nation's Great Plains. This image, titled "The Four Stages of Pork Packing in Cincinnati," shows the industrial nature of the meatpacking business, as the steps are carried out in an assembly line fashion: killing, cutting, rendering, and salting, standardized processes resulting in a uniform product ready for shipment. Much of the era's transformation, from indoor lighting to refrigerated railroad cars, was made possible by the work of Thomas Edison. Famous not just for his pioneering work developing electricity, Edison was committed to using scientific research to create a better and brighter future. Edison saw his laboratory in Menlo Park, New Jersey, as a center for innovation. He called it an invention factory and was proud of all the research and development that took place there. The work of building the modern city would be carried out not just by business leaders and scientific researchers, though. Most of the labor would be performed by the masses of people who were flooding into the nation's cities during this period. Many of those new arrivals were coming from the American South, moving northward in the Great Migration, hoping to find a better life. Others came from other countries. The immigrants of the mid-19th century had hailed from northern and western Europe, from Ireland, England, and Germany. Those of the late 19th and early 20th centuries came instead from southern and eastern Europe, from Italy, Greece, and Russia. Arriving immigrants passed through Ellis Island in New York for processing. For some, this was a quick and simple process, but for others it could become a prolonged ordeal. The arriving immigrants had few resources at their disposal. They were, however, courted by the political machines. Here we see the headquarters of the most famous of those machines, New York's Tammany Hall. Political machines strengthened the political party system, with politicians providing favors to their supporters in the community. These favors could include jobs, contracts, and other benefits. The American South during this time was a place divided by stark contrasts. On the one hand, gleaming office buildings began to rise as industry took hold. A new South was being born, and its supporters loudly proclaimed that it would generate profits and better living for those in the region. But the New South would, in many ways, recreate the horrible traumas of the Old South, that time before the Civil War. As African Americans began to expect, and sometimes demand, political, social, and economic rights, white backlash increased. A wave of lynching gripped the nation, especially the South, from 1880 to 1930. These brutal murders, carried out most often by white mobs, would claim the lives of over 400 individuals in the state of Georgia alone. Looking at those figures, one might wonder why these crimes were allowed to continue. Why was lynching not made a federal offense, so that federal authorities would be charged with investigating and prosecuting such crimes? The brutality of the South was allowed and even encouraged by those in the North. in an era when most white Americans, regardless of region, did not view African Americans with respect. The first art form that was truly invented in America was blackface minstrelsy, which involved white performers darkening their faces with cork and performing characters that were parodies of African Americans. This entertainment was incredibly popular all over the country, and it limited the ways in which many white Americans understood race. Such minstrel shows and many other types of entertainment were performed at the World's Fairs, such as the famous 1893 Columbian Exhibition in Chicago. Shown here is the White City, a grand temporary exhibit designed to showcase the era's state-of-the-art achievements in urban planning and design. Visitors to the fair saw art, food, and performances that overwhelmed their senses. A generation adjusting to massive industrialization, a major influx of new immigrants, and ever-worsening race relations, visitors to the fair were poised to witness the turn of the 20th century. Many likely wondered if the future would live up to their dreams.